Hi, I'm Virginia from Write Clinic, and welcome to the Medical Writing Uncut Podcast. Here with me today is the fantastic Rina Newton.
Hi, Virginia. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Pleasure, as always.
Thank you. All right, so let's get started. Would you like to introduce yourself and what you do?
Sure. So, my name is Rina. I am a pharmacist and I have worked in or for the pharmaceutical industry for the last 30 years, mainly in the areas of medical and compliance. I specialize in the ABPI Code of Practice, which is the rule book that pharma have to always adhere to stay on the right side of the law. And I feel very passionately that complying with that rule book isn't something for a privileged few. I think that compliance confidence belongs to everybody.
I love that. I think it's so good to specialize in compliance because it affects everything that we do, especially in, marketing and how medicines go to market, how they get approved. And then also if you're a medical writer or aspiring medical writer watching or listening to this, then you need to know about compliance in every sense, especially when you're writing. So
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. So where would you recommend that medical writers go to learn about compliance and the ABPI?
I mean, it's a tough one, really. I think, certainly we see a whole spectrum of medical writers who are on their learning journey. And some of them are very young and they could be graduates learning. And some of them could have worked in a number of industries or a number of agencies, but they're starting off working for pharma clients or working in-house in pharma. And of course, a lot of them may think that the starting point is actually going to the book itself. That would never be my recommendation. It wouldn't be my recommendation to anyone working with the code that you'd sit in some horrible dark room one day, trying to read it all and hope that some of it goes in. The best way to learn about how the code affects you is absolutely on the job. So we're very lucky in the UK that when there's a complaint made about a pharmaceutical company that might have breached the code, all those case rulings are published on the PMCPA website. And it's quite nice then for when we're training people like new medical writers to say, well, what campaign are you working on? Well, I'm working on a patient campaign. What would you consider that might be categorized as? Well, we're going to call it patient literature or patient support. Then I would say go and find a case ruling that relates to patient support. And in there, you will find what the PMCPA panel say is good and bad about such programs. And then the last place after you've read the ruling is to link back to the code. So it's not the starting place. It's more like an ending place just to cement the practical everyday knowledge that you've gained from reading a case. So that would be my strong advice.
I love that. I think I find the case study so fascinating as well, because sometimes there will be, an employee writes a LinkedIn post and then how that got reported and then, what happened after that. It's kind of like a little bit of a pharma drama, if you like.
Drama, drama. I love that. They're very juicy, certainly.
Yeah, very juicy case studies. And I think it also links back to how we learn things in healthcare as well, because we usually learn things through case studies. So it's all well and good learning, how a drug works, but until you've heard it through a story or how it affected a patient, then it's kind of more difficult to, put it into your mind and how it would actually work in practice. So what have you seen pop up as a recent interesting case study?
So I think there's case studies published all the time, and I'm obviously a compliance nerd. I find all of them really interesting and juicy for the reasons you've just described there. But I think a good one for maybe medical writers to have a look at is that there are two cases published versus Novartis last month and the month before, and they both relate to promotional emails that have been created and sent by a third party medical publisher. So I think all the learnings here is that Global, who are outside of the UK, created the campaign. They created it for what they deemed to be EU HCPs. somebody misread that as Europe HCPs and sent them to UK healthcare professionals. And then we've got the added feature of there was lots in that email that wasn't compliant with the UK code. And although Novartis Global are based in Switzerland and they comply with the European code, certainly there were aspects in there about how the medicine had been described, whether promotion was aligned to the summary of product characteristics or not. And all of those things were a breach, and not a breach for Novartis Global, but a breach for Novartis UK. And so medical writers can really learn whether you're in-house or whether you're agency, how your pharma employer or client is always liable for everything that you do if it's on their behalf. And simple things like knowing the difference between EU and Europe. I mean, how do you train a medical writer on these pieces? Some of it is assumed common sense as well. So learning, staying on top of your general knowledge, staying on top of what the specific pieces are, and knowing that when you work on a medicine, the Bible for that medicine is its summary of product characteristics. This reflects its product license. You can't do anything in this space unless you know what that license says. So a great couple of cases.
Fantastic. It's really sound advice there. Thank you so much. So we also had a little bit of a brief chat about AI. So what are your thoughts on AI and medical writing and, making it fit with compliance?
Wouldn't be a podcast without some sort of mention of AI, would it really, Virginia? I think for all its benefits, and there are a huge number of benefits that using AI will bring to efficiency, to workload, to admin burden, and the such like. I guess my only word of caution is about authenticity. Authenticity is one of my core values. I believe in it very strongly. I feel very uncomfortable if something that came from me or was presented by me was not authentically by me. So I think although AI is very good at providing summaries or finding information, ultimately that human touch and that human voice must shine through, particularly in this space, because we've been talking about engaging patients with simple language, with effective tools, and that could be missed if the human is missed in this process.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think one of the most important things that I've learned through co-producing health information for patients and the public is there will always be people in a user group that will come up with an idea or with an honest story that hasn't been recorded or documented anywhere. And I think that's one of the issues with AI is that people see it as complete information, but actually it's only what people have actually allowed to be published that can be used in the AI. And so the input and the output, can really vary based on each other. So yeah, I think of AI as recycled content, and anything that's ever been generated with AI should be rewritten, completely rewritten, and verified, like you said. And also make sure that it's authentic before you say it's published by someone. So yeah, really interesting insights. So what's next on the horizon for you? What are you working on next?
So I kind of mentioned at the beginning there that I believe very strongly that compliance confidence is for everyone. So what that means for me, for us at Code Clarity, is that we are firmly driven to create very small, bite-sized, digestible chunks of knowledge, training, and so on, which people should be able to access anywhere and everywhere. And what I mean by that is, this book, we consider it a bit like a dictionary. You wouldn't read it from start to finish and go, right, I'm done. You want to be able to dip into it when you need and understand what it means, and then apply that learning so that compliance improves. And generally speaking, in fact, I'll be bold and be completely honest with you, Virginia. What I would like to see is that the PMCPA, who's the authority that deals with complaints, is effectively made redundant. And I'm effectively made redundant because there is no need for complaints anymore because pharma have actually seriously improved with their compliance.
I love that. I think that's such a great kind of vision and hope for the future. And I think also it's really interesting that, you've kind of gone from being a pharmacist to working in compliance. And essentially, it's a very transferable skill. And I think,
Mm,
there's nothing that you can't do once you have that knowledge, and also you're a professional at the end of the day, so you know that you need to follow rules, you need to keep your knowledge up to date, and kind of the compliance and regulatory space is very fluid and dynamic, so it's constantly changing. You have to stay on top of it. Medicines get discontinued, or medicines have um, there are shortages, or they're new to market as well. So there's lots of different things that will be going on that are kind of relative. And then also patient education materials, advertising to healthcare professionals, all of these things have rules, and it's a good thing that they do. So
absolutely. So we both work in areas that are just a moving feast. And although the law doesn't change very often, the code changes every 2 to 3 years. So, yeah, we're always going to be busy people, I think.
yeah. Yeah, and I think also it depends on what case studies pop up, because I think the great thing about humans is that we learn from our mistakes, and then we put things in place to make sure that we can try and avoid them happening again. And that's what's important. It's about learning and growth at the end of the day, and making sure people get the care that they need. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Virginia. Anytime.
Awesome. And thank you so much for watching or listening. And we'll see you at the next episode. Bye.
Bye.